Welcome back to another episode of the podcast featuring your host, Philip Wells. And again, the podcast is actually an acronym that stands for Therapy Helps Everyone. And every time I come on this show, that is truly the goal. I want to show everyone how therapy, but also mental health, can help everyone out there, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, brother, sister, someone who's a top athlete, someone who's a top performer, and let's say their job, whatever it is. That's my goal, to try to help you guys see how therapy can help everyone. And today I actually have a guest with me, a great friend of mine, and we're going to get into some really good stuff. We're going to actually talk about life after a breakup. And the reason why we want to speak about this is because of quarantine and how that has affected a lot of couples. But even before quarantine and even after quarantine, people will be, unfortunately experiencing turmoil in their relationships, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to make sure we cover this. So before we get started, if you have questions after this podcast, definitely comment, send them to me, all that good stuff. So Raven is a registered marriage and family therapist intern for the state of Florida, and she's also a full-time doctoral student. Her academic career has led her to discover her passion within the mental health field and ultimately focus her capstone research project on this, which is on couples and relationships, but specifically Black couples and the various incidences that impact the quality of their intimate relationship. All right. So, Raven, first off, tell us how you're doing today.
I'm well. I am well. It is, I don't know whenever everybody will hear this, but presently it is a beautiful Sunday evening. So I'm doing well. So thank you for having me. Yes.
Definitely. I appreciate that. And one thing that I wanted to say before we get started is I want to ask if you can kind of explain what's the difference between someone who is an LMFT, so a licensed marriage and family therapist, versus someone who may be, an LMHC or LCSW?
Yes. So we all fall under the same mental health umbrella. So a lot of times people clump us all together as therapists and counselors and things of that nature. The biggest difference is just going to be our training. The mental health counselors are trained specifically with regard to the DSM and diagnosing and things of that nature. The LTSW, social work, and that's a huge umbrella of what social work is considered. And then someone like myself, a marriage and family therapist, we're trained in natural system or systems thinking. I'm a natural systems thinker. That's my theory of choice, but we are trained in systems. And so we look at a client in their larger scheme of things, there's systems that they are a part of and not just as the individual. So.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And that's so important because a lot of times I have people reach out to me and the first thing they say is, "Hey, can I schedule an appointment with you?" And I'm like, "Whoa, like before we do that, like tell me what brings you into therapy, what is it that you're looking for?" And I always try to make the parallel between, if someone's up on trial for, let's say, murder, they don't want to get a tax attorney, right? Or a business attorney. They want a defense attorney, right? And it's the same thing in therapy, right? So you want to make sure that you get the therapist that fits you, but also has experience in that area. And just like you said, we all fall under the same umbrella. So someone with the LCSW, someone with the LMAC, they can definitely provide couples or family therapy. But I always would like to think that, the LMFTs, the licensed marriage and family therapists, they'll bring a different element to the room because that's what they solely focus on. Just like you said with the systems. So I know a lot of people, when they look on Psychology Today, they see all the letters and they think, we're all the same, but we're kind of different in a sense. So I'm definitely glad that you cleared that up for us. Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So like I said, this episode I'm excited about it. It's about couples and what to do after the breakup. This could be, breakup from a 1 year, couple. This could be a divorce, someone who's gotten into a divorce, 10, 20 years later, whatever it is. We want to make sure we help you guys out. So the first thing that I wanted to ask actually is, before someone gets into a breakup, right, what are some maintenance tips that they can use to stay in that relationship, but also make sure that the relationship lasts?
That's a great question. I think the key word that you said was maintenance. I think people forget that we have to work it just like your car. You have to tune up your car. You get the oil change. You got to get your tires rotated. you got to maintain your relationship as well. So especially like you said, someone who's been with their partner for a year, maybe 365 days later, you're not with the same person that you met. And so that maintenance of the relationship, I think communicating, I think everybody knows that, communication is key, but that's vital. You guys have to communicate. There's a lot of people who are in relationships who are not having those intimate conversations that need to be had, like where quarantine has hit all of us, one way or another. And we got to discuss what that looks like as far as career, as far as couples, as far as families, children. There's just so many different layers. I think communicating, reaching out to somebody, whether it's a professional, I highly recommend a professional, but just having a support system in general. If you cannot reach out, like we said, quarantine, COVID, people are like, I don't have the funds for a therapist just yet. But finding somebody who supports you and can help you make the best decision for self.
Definitely, definitely. And a big word that you said there was communication. And I know a lot of people hear that a lot, like just like you said. And actually, there's this thing called love languages. And I think everyone's heard of it, but just in case, I wanted you to kind of like tell people like, what is love languages? Maybe even just an example, but also probably why that's so important to know your partner's love language.
Absolutely. It is. For me, I believe it's extremely important to know your partner's love language and yours as well. Because and then also realizing that your love language may change. So if you at one point your love language, okay, well I guess let's start with the love languages. There are 5 love languages. There's a free quiz, go online, love languages, Google it. That's like my first resource that I feel like I send to individuals and couples. Like, hey, take this, see what your own love language is, and then that can help you learn to love yourself appropriately and properly, as well as your partner. So the love languages, there's acts of service, physical touch, quality time. What are they?
Words of affirmation is another one.
Affirmations, yes. Quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation. We're missing one of them.
Oh, gifts. Gifts is another one.
Yes, receiving gifts. Receiving gifts. So those are like the 5 love languages. And we all score differently on those. So you'll get a score for each language or love language, but they are numbered. So you would pay attention to what you scored highest on. So me personally, I've taken the love language quiz time and time again, and unwaveringly, my 2 top love languages is quality time and physical touch. If we can sit and watch a movie while we're arm in arm, I'm the happiest person. And my fiance's top love language is acts of service. So now I know he likes coming home to the dishes done. It's always like those things. So it's so simple. So because my love languages are physical touch and quality time. So if I'm loving him like that because that's what I need, I'm missing the mark. Because he doesn't really, he may appreciate the quality time and the physical touch, but those acts of services mean more to him. And so I think it's just understanding what your partner's love language is, knowing what yours is, so you can express what you need in a relationship. That's what's important.
Definitely, definitely. And it's so crucial that people take the time to investigate what their love language is. And you don't have to wait to be in a relationship to do that.
No,
If you're
do it
single.
while you're single. I highly recommend do it while you're single. So when you do enter that relationship, you can let them know, hey, this is what I like. So up front, you're expressing what you need in the relationship and vice versa.
Oh, that is so important. So important. And actually, that's going to take me off to another like turn or whatever. I think it's so important when you're first getting into a relationship to be assertive and not be afraid of, explaining what it is that you want out of this relationship, right? Because it sets the relationship up for whether it's failure or success, right? And you want to make sure that you guys are both clear on where you guys stand. So assertiveness is big in every aspect of your life, but also definitely within a relationship is very, very important. And before we actually got on, you actually brought up a phrase that I thought was very important. It's very cool. I actually have a few clients that I talked to about this, and it's codependency. And before we get into that, I want you to kind of explain, what is codependency? What does that look like?
So codependency could look like a number of things in different relationships. but basically it's an emotional or physical attachment to another person, so much so that that's how you function. So you are codependent on this person, and that helps you function well. Or I don't know, well, that's tricky. It helps you function, period. So but so that could look like needing someone to confirm everything for you. You're so codependent on that person, so you check in with them to make sure you can do anything. Like, hey, you sure you said chicken for dinner, right? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, okay, well, are you sure? Leaning on somebody so much so that you can't. Oh, I was going to use one of my therapeutic words. Well, I was going to say
Nah,
that
go
you
ahead, go ahead.
can differentiate yourself from that person. So you cannot stand alone without that person. So that's what codependency looks like, when you cannot stand alone without that person.
Definitely, definitely. And it actually takes me back to when Will Smith and Jada Pinkett, there it was like a clip where he said like he's not responsible for like her happiness in this relationship. He's responsible for his and she's responsible for hers. Right. And that's not to say that you're not gonna do nice things for them or pay attention to their love languages as we mentioned. But at the end of the day, like you have to find happiness within yourself first, right? Before you can get into that relationship. So, because at the end of the day, if that person were to leave, or let's say that person decided that your worth wasn't what it was, right? Let's say your worth was, astronomical, right? It was everything. And then, a month later, 2 months, a year, they decided, okay, you're not worth that anymore. Then in your mind and I guess, well, yeah, just in your mind, you just feel like, okay, maybe I did regress, or maybe I'm not worth what I once was, in a sense. So that's a good point. So, like, when someone has codependency, right? Like, how do they manage to kind of break away from that codependency? Like, what advice would you give people to kind of develop their own sense of, who they are?
Yeah. The first thing is actually recognizing the codependency, because sometimes you don't realize that a certain behavior is actually codependency. And I think it actually goes beyond the current intimate relationship that you're in and goes back to the family of origin. What did codependency look like in your family? Were you codependent on your mother? That, because I've heard this before, I've come across those students, especially when in undergrad, when they went off to school and then they needed to call a doctor's office, or they wanted to something as simple as like order a pizza. I've actually had someone who's like, oh, I call my mom and she orders all of my food. Although, oh, your mom is 6 hours away. You're up and away at school and your mom is home. But if you want to order to go, you have this anxiety, or for whatever reason, that you can't make the phone call. So your mother still makes those phone calls for you. And that's codependency. You are completely dependent on your mom to do something as simple as make a phone call for you. That's something that you gotta, at some point somebody might say, oh, that's no big deal. My mom's always done that. And it's like, okay, yeah, she has. But then at what point do you break away? When can you stand up or stand alone in self and be able to still maintain livelihood? So I think it's recognizing what codependency is, what it may look like, because like I said, it looks different in different relationships. So I would say, look at the behavior, question it first, and then if you do recognize that you are codependent on your partner, then try to see how you can now maneuver. So let's take that example of the mom making these phone calls. Now I've recognized, whoa, I have a thing where I can't make these phone calls on my own, and I need my mom. I need her to do this for me. How can I break away so that I'm able to do this on my own? I start little by little. Maybe I start with maybe the doctor calling and making a doctor's appointment is a big deal. That's another profession. Okay, but so let's start with ordering to go. Let's order your own food to go. Let's try that. I think it's baby steps until you can really stand on your own and make that big phone call.
Definitely, definitely. And it's so important that they figure out what it looks like for them and then how to move forward, because it looks different for everybody. You can't assume that the way they move or the way they do things or how they, whatever it is, how I should do it. It should be the playbook for myself. And that's not quite it, right? Like it's all about how you function and how do you, improve your level of functioning by separating from that person. Just slowly but surely. And we're not saying obviously, you want to just separate completely, but we want to be at a healthy level. And I think that's where you're getting at with that. And also there's this so like I'm studying to get my LMAC, you're studying to get your LMFT. So like there's this word that's used, I guess, more in your field. It's called enmeshment, right?
Yeah.
And enmeshment, an enmeshment is when those lines are blurred, right? It's when the mother sees the son more as like a friend or the father of the house or the man of the household or whatever the case it may be.
Yes.
Um, a great example. So the game, right? The game recently came back to Netflix, right? So a great example, a great example of enmeshment is Malik and his mom, right? Like that's a clear sign of an enmeshment, right? Like they have this kind of like it is mother son, but it's almost like a husband wife type relationship, right? Where he can talk to her any type of way, he can make decisions, and things like that. And one thing that he said in one episode was that you know he didn't want her going out to see to date other men or to get other athletes to represent her or for her to represent them as their agent, right? So it's a very enmeshed relationship. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great example. I have to. I started watching, but I haven't, caught up. But yeah, that relationship, that dynamic in itself is dynamic, and it's because it's a mother son, like you said. It's also the agent and athlete, that client, that relationship. So those boundaries get blurred, and I think that's where the enmeshment comes in, where the boundaries are blurred. Is that your mother? Is that your agent? Or is that your woman? Because you're saying she can't go and date other, but So I think it's like, where is that the clear cut boundaries?
Exactly. Exactly. Ah, great point. Great point. Enmeshment. I like that. I'm gonna take that away with me.
Yeah, love it. That was a great example. That was enmeshment to the T.
Definitely. Definitely.
And
So
codependency to the T, because he needed his mom to do a lot of things for him in the role of agent or mom or something like that. And so, yeah.
no, that's a good point. That's a good point. And we probably touch on that a little bit more in the show as well. It's so important to point that out. So with that being said, so let's say someone's already going through their breakup, whether it's a day, a month, because breakups, man, they can affect people, for ever how long or in different ways, whatever it is. There's no clear cut playbook. So what are some things that you experience from clients fresh out of a breakup? What are some of their complaints as soon as they get out of a relationship?
I think the most obvious one that everyone recognizes is that, like, oh my goodness, like, what do I do now? If it's a breakup that you did not want, or if you were the one who ended things, and now it's like, oh my gosh, this person won't leave me alone, and now they're a stalker, and it's just like, or maybe they're just trying to figure out what's going on because they really saw a future, you know. But I think what you see most often is that confusion stage of like, what next? What am I supposed to do? And I feel as though all types of breakups. This is intimate relationships as well as platonic friendships that end. A breakup is a breakup. It gives you an opportunity to sit with yourself, sit and look at it, review the last relationship, whether it's a month, 6 months, a year, and really sit and be like, okay, so did I like the way I was in that relationship? And like remove the other person altogether. Let's look at self. Did I like the way that I was in that relationship? Yeah, if you felt as though you could do nothing different, then I think that's when you start to explore. So, what did the other person experience for them to not want to keep this relationship? I think that's a question that you can, toss around and possibly get some answers to.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. Like, I think a lot of people when they go through a breakup, they think like, "Oh, what could I have done better?" Right? Like, what did I do wrong? Right?
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to core beliefs that people get instilled in them when they're at a young age, right? Like, you're unlovable or you're not worthy, whatever it
Mhm.
is. As a result, that's kind of like their way of seeing the world. I always tell my clients like core beliefs are kind of like a pair of shades, right? Or a pair of glasses, right? It really does control how you see things, right? It controls your perception, right? So I like what you said there, and I think it's important that they kind of look not at it as, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that, but kind of just take it for what it is. Like if it didn't work out, it didn't work out, and that's kind of like a cold statement, but I think it kind of helps you towards that acceptance piece, right? Trying to move forward in your healing, right? So
Absolutely. And I think, why didn't it work out? If you weren't the nicest person, call yourself out and do that work. Why was I so evil or mean or nasty in that relationship to that person? if you can sit with yourself. Some people can't sit with themselves and actually say that about themselves. So I think it's just being honest with yourself, because if you can't be honest with yourself, you can't, that's probably why the relationship didn't work. If you can't be honest with yourself, how can you be honest with anyone else?
Nah, definitely, definitely. As a matter of fact, do you find men cope with relationship like breakups different from women? Like, is there a myth about how they cope with those breakups?
I mean, of course, we can't generalize for
Mhm.
everyone, but we can say that I would comfortably say that males and females experience breakups different because of how we are brought up in society. I think it goes way to the macro level of how society raises us up, and men are not supposed to be emotional or vulnerable at all, because that in American society equates to weakness. So you may not find the typical male like exposing himself emotionally post breakup, where you may see that the woman who is supposed to be emotional is crying and can't get out of bed and all of what the movies try to make us look like. But yeah, I think male and men and women handle breakups differently, but I think it's possibly how we're cultured to handle breakups.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And going back to your previous answer, like, and essentially it's about how to cope with breakups. I mean, it's okay to not be okay, but also to look at yourself in the mirror and try to accept whatever it is that you see in that mirror. Because I think what happens a lot of times, people go through that confusion phase, but also like that denial phase. So we talk about the stages of grief. A lot of people attribute that to when they break up with their, or when someone passes, right? But as you mentioned, it can not only be a breakup, it could be a loss of a friend. Maybe your friend moved to a different state, right? Those are all things that attribute to those stages of grief. And I think what happens is a lot of people get caught in that denial phase, and as a result, they never move out of that phase,
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And I'm actually reading this book about acceptance and commitment therapy. And one of the biggest things is being able to sit and accept that pain that you experience, because pain is inevitable, right? Everyone experiences pain. But what we can prevent is the suffering that comes with that pain. So as a result, people try to avoid that feeling. So I'm speaking to the men and the classical thinking. So what men may do, you see it in the movies, they may go and sleep around with other women as a way to kind of cope with that feeling of hurt, right? Um, you may see just people in general may start drinking, smoking, whatever it is, and as a result, that has its own pain and suffering that comes with that. So now that you're drinking and smoking, right, or you're sleeping around with other women, you probably open yourself up to, catching diseases, or, lacking in certain areas of your life, whether it's, your friendships, your family, maybe even your work, your duties at your job, right? All these things can be attributed. And if we don't look at that pain in its face and accept it, we would start to increase the amount of suffering that we're doing from that one event. So it is very important to be able to just accept it and sit with that pain for a little while.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that, because I think that's one of the most difficult things to do is sit in it. No one wants to sit in something that hurts, but that's where you learn who you truly are. You learn your strength when you sit in that pain. You learn your worth, more of your worth when you can sit there and really evaluate, like, why am I doing this? And because I think everything that you mentioned, I was just thinking codependency. Codependency. You say you break up and now you go sleeping around. You're codependent on someone else being there to fulfill you as a person. So now you've got to go sleep around, or you break up and now you pick up the bottle. And it's like, well, now you're codependent on this alcohol to fill this void of this relationship. So when you start picking up all these different habits and behaviors post breakup, that's a sign of, let me, take a look at myself. What's going on here? Like, why am I doing all of this now? That's important.
Exactly, exactly. It's crucial, man. It's very crucial, and actually, that has to be the first step to healing, right? That has to be, like, there's no way around it. If you try to go around it, you're just, it's almost like building a house on a bad foundation, right? Like if you don't have that acceptance, if you don't take time to learn whatever it is that caused you guys to break up. And again, it's probably not you. It's probably, just you two just didn't work together. Whatever it is, I think it's going to make it harder to go into that next relationship, right?
Mhm.
So I always try to tell people to see, the beauty in a crisis, and I try to always say that, like, there's beauty in a crisis, right?
Mhm.
And when you break up with someone, it provides a very unique moment for you to learn, like you said, why this didn't work out. You know, like there's not too many opportunities that we get like that, and it can actually lead you to finding the one that you truly wanted to be with or needed to be with, or whatever it is, however you want to phrase it, in the
Mhm.
first place. So take that as a lesson. And I want to say Jay-Z or someone said that, right? Like there's no such thing as a loss, only lessons. So
I was going to say, look for the lesson in all of it. Everything ending teaches you something. Back to the basics of elementary school ending, and you're now moving on to middle school, or middle school ending, and you're moving to high school. That ending has now taught you something to take on to the next level of life. So, do use the same thing in a relationship. That relationship is over. What lessons did I learn from that? I learned that I didn't value myself enough, and that's why the relationship ended. Okay, cool. We're moving forward. I know that I need to value myself. What does that look like? I don't know. Well, let's figure it out, and I think it's doing those baby steps so that when you go into that next relationship, oh no, that's unacceptable because I learned in my last relationship that I'm not okay with that. So moving forward, and I think that goes back to that assertiveness that you said. And I was going to say, assert yourself respectfully, like just, but let them know, like, oh, this is what it is. I've learned this about myself, especially the older we get, we're moving on to our 30s. I'm just going to group us all, these our 90s babies.
mhm.
We're, we're moving our on up, So I think it's just like we gotta sit and do that work, and then be able to assertively let someone know, like, oh, because I think once you know your worth, then you're able to then let somebody else know, this is my worth. I value myself at this. You must meet me here or higher.
Mhm. I like that. I like that. And I'm taking notes. I'm gonna bring it to
Yeah,
my next session.
absolutely. I'm taking notes. I'm like, oh, that was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I think what's tough, and I actually been trying this a little bit with myself lately with the assertiveness piece. I think it's the fact that when you try to be assertive, people think, or people feel guilty for being assertive or for asking for what it is that they want. Or maybe they feel like they're being bougie or whatever it is, they're doing too much. But no, like if this is what you want, it is okay to ask for those things, right? And I think that may be even like a societal thing, or maybe even a cultural thing, wherever you've been raised or how you've been raised, right? So it is definitely okay to say, hey, these are some things that are, deal breakers. These are things that I want. These are things that I need in a relationship. And to say that at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Because it's going to make it easier to maintain that relationship as things go on.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. So let's say someone's broken up, right? And, they hurt, they feel bad, that self-esteem is kind of lacking, right? Like how do they build that confidence, right? To get back out there and date again, right? How do they do that?
So I always tell my newly single people to date yourself. Don't go looking for the next person to that codependency. Don't look for the next person to fill that spot. Date yourself. Take yourself out and be like, okay, I can go to the movies by myself. Cool. I can go to the restaurant by myself. Cool. Like I like this. Get comfortable with being by yourself. I think that's another thing. A lot of us don't like to be by ourselves. That's when our thoughts get going and this and that. And so people run away from being by themselves and they look for a partner or a friend or somebody that they can always hit up or call. And it's like, no, sit by yourself. Date yourself a little bit. Really reflect on the last relationship. What are you taking with you into the future? What are you leaving behind? Like, okay, I didn't like that at all. That can stay where that's at with that ex. Like I'm not bringing that nowhere with me to the future. So I think it's really getting to like yourself. Do you even like yourself? I think that's a thing. You have to like yourself before you can expect somebody to like you. You
Mhm.
got to love yourself before you can expect somebody else to love yourself or love you. So I think it's that sit in your singleness and be okay with sitting in your singleness. I think a lot of times society makes singleness look lonely and sad and horrible. And it's like, or it could be the best time of your life because you're getting to know who you are. So when you are ready to meet your happily ever after, if that's what you're going for, you know exactly who you are and who is going into that next relationship.
Wow, wow, some good points, really good points. you know, as you were speaking in the first part about, hey, like, do you love yourself? Do you even like being with yourself? The first thing that I thought about, and this is going back to the codependency, is that I wonder if people run to relationship as a way to avoid who they are, or seeing that person in the mirror, like, hey, if I can get into a relationship, if I can, shower this woman with gifts, or if I can show that I can be a good woman to a man, it kind of boosts my self-worth, but also it takes my mind off of looking at maybe some of the trauma, some of the pain, whatever it is that
Absolutely.
I've gone through. Do you think that's the case for a lot of people, or some
Ab-
people?
some people, yeah, absolutely. You know, my traumas from childhood keeps me in a space that I must help somebody else. I must be in in a relationship where I am making sure meals are prepared and the house is tidy because that's what this person likes. But it's like because your traumas that you're carrying with you from childhood or previous relationships are telling you that you must keep this partner happy by maintaining X, Y, and Z. You know, and then it's like sometimes it becomes too much. And so I think for sure people run into relationships or being with someone else just so they can avoid those moments of having to really sit and be like, ooh, I don't really like that about myself. You know, I don't like that I drink all the time, but I'm going to continue to drink because instead of really sitting and be like, you know what, let's scratch all of this extra and sit in the mud. I think that's the ugly, the dirty, the
Mhm.
that nobody likes. That's where you got to sit for a little bit before you can come out sparkling and clean and shining once you know who you are, for
Nah,
sure.
definitely, definitely. Those are some good points, man. And I think the way it works is that our mind is just trained to avoid anything that's uncomfortable,
Ooh,
right? You can think about, and we can even look at it physically, right? Like if you go to a stove and the stove is hot, like you're going to back away, right? Like that's obvious, you want to back away from that heat or whatever it is. Same thing with our emotions, right? And actually,
mhm.
that's how like anxiety and other things build, whether it's trauma, depression, and things like that. Like we try to avoid these uncomfortable feelings. And as a result, we develop unhealthy coping skills, but also we probably don't even look at what it is that's really hurting us. And as a result, those things just build, right? And I encourage everyone listening to be confident in sitting in that mud, as Raven mentioned. Be okay with sitting in that mud, right? And also, I think this is probably why like mindfulness is so important, because honestly, I think what happens, and this goes back to acceptance and commitment therapy,
Mhm.
after that breakup, whether it's a month, 2 months, whatever it is, like the initial shock or the initial pain, it should be gone, right? Like just that initial pain, it should be gone. But we fall victim to that suffering by, you know, thinking about like all the negatives, like, oh, I can never find
Yeah.
a husband now or a wife now, right? Or man, I should have done this, I should have done that. And as a result, we stay in the past, or we stay in the present, or we stay in the future. And we
Yes.
totally disregard the present. And as a result, we are constantly suffering, right? Constantly suffering over this breakup. And I'm not telling people don't think about it, but I encourage you to sit in that present and sit in that moment just as it is and be totally non-judgmental about it. Right?
Yes.
Something very powerful can happen when you do that, when you sit with that pain. So
Yes. And I like to always remind people, be gentle with yourself. Like you would be gentle. You're gentle with everybody else's feelings, and you tiptoe, and you this and you that because you're cautious. Do the same. Give yourself that same gentleness, that same kindness, that same. If you're broken, okay, be broken and then heal. You know, don't sit here and, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're still stuck on it. It's been 2 years. It's been 2 years and you're still struggling, and that's okay. There's some people who struggle for a lifetime, you know, so your 2 years looks like nothing. But be gentle with yourself and understand that it's all a process. You know, nothing happens overnight. That breakup hurt you, and it may hurt you tomorrow. but you can move past it with that mindfulness, like you're speaking on, doing that self work to build yourself back up for sure.
Exactly, exactly. I was taken aback when you said be gentle with yourself, because that's something I say so much, man. I say, yo, be gentle, practice that self compassionate, because you're like that with everyone else, right? And it's funny because like you'll meet the nicest people, right? And that's probably why they do it, right? Like you'll meet the nicest people who are very giving, very caring, all that good stuff, but they're just so critical
Yeah.
towards themselves, or so hard to be that way towards themselves, right? And it's funny, or it's strange or interesting to see, whatever the word is, right? And it's something that is I don't know, it's interesting. And I also say, like, be firm with yourself too, and it's a good combination of being firm and gentle with yourself. And I try to be like that with my clients, and I say that's a good um, feature that you want to have with a therapist as well. Like, you want a therapist that's going to be firm with you, but also gentle as well. Like, I think a combination of those two things are are big. Like, they're crucial, right?
Yeah. And I think it's finding that balance between the two, because one of too much of either one of those could be not good. If your therapist is extremely gentle on you, so you don't feel as though they're encouraging you to step out of whatever you feel as though you're going through, and I like to tell people too, it's okay to, like, you're supposed to test out your therapist, so if you meet with one and it doesn't work out, it is okay to find another one. Don't just settle like, okay, I've done this and I found my one and that's it. If you don't like it, you can go. It's okay. And I think if they're too firm with you, now you're scared, and now you're like, I don't know, I don't feel like I progressed enough, and my therapist is going to be mad at me. Like, there should be no pressure like that coming from your therapist. So if you feel any of that energy from your therapist, it's probably not the fit for you.
Definitely, definitely. And anybody listening, please take note of that, right? Like, you want a therapist that's going to be firm and gentle with you, but beyond all that, make sure you find the therapist that fits for you. Like, that is crucial. Like, you can have a therapist that knows everything, right? But if they're not a good fit for you, whether it's like from a cultural background or whatever it is, a way of communicating, um, then it may not work, even though they have all of this knowledge. So, great, great, great point. So, um, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I kind of wanted to dive back into it a little bit, and it's about healing, right? We hear this a lot, and also I saw a meme or something like that where it says what people think healing should look like, and
Uh-huh.
then what healing is supposed to look like, and it's like Denzel Washington crying and things like that. I
Yeah,
don't know. Did you see
I
it?
have not seen that, but it sounds like, if I know the Denzel crying face that I'm imagining, then yes.
And it's hilarious, because people have this idea of not only healing but self care, self love. It should be this fun thing. It should be
Beautiful,
yeah, beautiful,
majestic. Yeah, no.
right?
Yeah.
Like, healing is not all glitz and glamour, right? And you don't have to speak from like a right out of a breakup, or if you can, that'd be great. But I want you to kind of talk a little bit more about like what healing should look like. Maybe just some things that people listening can like actually do that could kind of take them on that path
Nope.
towards healing.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first thing that came to mind that I must let everybody know is that healing hurts. I don't want people to have this false notion that, I'm going to go to therapy and it's going to be so good. This person's going to listen to me ramble and then I'm going to go. Like, no, your therapist may ask you some questions that's going to kind of take you back. And it's like, whoa, am I really like that? Or, and it's supposed to be like, and I think that discomfort is where you sit. That's where you stay. When it becomes like, whoa, and you have to really like look at yourself for who you truly are. Like, wow, am I really that much of like an asshole? Like, because what you've shared and the therapist is now repeating what they've heard. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, and then they say this and you're like, oh yeah. Hey, that's when you're supposed to be able to sit with them and be like, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Now let me go on for the rest of this week and work on that. So I want to start off by saying healing is not this beautiful candles and bubble baths, the self-care that everybody likes to post. It could very well look like that. And I encourage candles and bubble baths. I love it. But I think that healing really looks like that the pain and then the beauty after it. You know, I think that's what healing is. I think healing, people think healing looks like the beautiful side of it, but healing is the beautiful as well as because we wouldn't know dark without lightness. We wouldn't know happiness without sadness. So I feel like you have to have both of those to know what it looks like. So to heal, you have to have that hard part of it as well as the beautiful side of it. So just know healing does not look like just the fun, beautiful side. There's some of that, ooh, that hurts too. That's healing.
Gotcha. You know, so maybe this is me just being a guy how I think of it as like going to the gym and like working out and breaking down those muscles, and it's a very uncomfortable thing, right? And I think that's why a lot of people don't work out consistently because it's
Right.
gonna hurt, right? And that's the whole point of it, breaking down a muscle, and
Mhm.
it'll grow back 3 times as stronger, right? And we have to be okay with being in that uncomfortable, that hurting phase, because the results after is going to be beautiful, as you mentioned, right? But we have to go through that uncomfortable phase just a little bit, right? So healing is not all glitz and glamour, right? And one can even argue that can be kind of harmful as well. Like it just serves as a distraction, right? And that can be a totally different topic.
Mhm.
But I want to move on. I want to ask for those who are, in a breakup and they are considering getting back with their ex, whatever it is,
Mhm.
like what things should they consider, or what things should they do before they decide to go back into that relationship?
Go to therapy. Try out some couples therapy. I feel like getting that third person, non-judgmental, unbiased person to sit here and listen to, let me hear you. Okay, this is what this sounds like. And it's like, it just sounds like a miscommunication. And then you're like, oh, wow, maybe it was simply miscommunication the entire time. But you guys can't see it. All you see is, oh, all we do is argue. All she does is nag. And all he does is play the video game. And it's just like, or maybe it's just miscommunicating. Maybe it's just state, I don't mind when you play a video game, but could you keep it between the hours of this and this? Because I would like some together time during the day. Let's just communicate, what our needs are. So I think if you are broken up and considering getting back with that person, go into it differently. Have the intention to go into the relationship differently. Why would you break up with somebody just to get back with them and do the same thing over? They say that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and
Yeah.
expecting a different result. So if this is a relationship that you want, the long term, long haul, let's do the nitty gritty work of self, you doing your own thing, them doing their own healing. When I say their own thing, I mean healing. You doing your healing, not your own thing. You doing your healing, they're doing their healing, and then you guys can come together healing, because none of us are healed overnight. So you guys get back together healing, and then you can grow into whatever relationship you guys are looking for.
Good points, good points. And I hope everyone takes note of that. I think that, the idea of couples counseling just counseling in general can kind of like, freak people out a little bit, even still to this day. And I think it's okay to let people know, like, hey, this could be an option that you guys look out for or try. And the biggest thing about going to a couples counselor versus, talking to your girls, talking to your guys, is that they're unbiased, right? Like, you don't want to be talking and getting advice from the guy who is, and this is kind of like a blanket statement, so don't take me literally. But you don't want advice from the guy who is, single, been through 3 divorces. Like, their view is a little jaded, right? They could possibly give good information, but I want someone who is not, my homeboy, or someone whose view may be a little jaded, right? I want someone who is professional, someone who's research some things, someone who's went to school for this, can kind of give me like that unbiased feedback that I need. And I think that's the biggest difference between getting advice from your girls, your guys, whoever, versus, someone who's a therapist. So I definitely think a lot of people should look into it.
Absolutely. Because you go to your friends and your family members, and they're invested in you and your well being and your happiness. So, all of the advice that I'm going to give my sister is going to be different from what I'm giving a client because I'm invested in my sister in a completely different way. So, we don't like him anymore. Oh, we don't like him. So, and that's not a stance that I take as a therapist. You come in and you're like, oh, I hate him and we're breaking up and I don't want to. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, but I'm so in love and we're looking at wedding rings. And I'm here with you. Like, I'm encouraging whatever is healthy for the client. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, no, he cheated on you, so you need to leave him. I'm sitting here saying, what works best for you? Because that may be that we can work this out and remain together. So, and if that's the case, then I'm here to help my client to wherever outcome they're looking for.
Gotcha.
As long as it's healthy. As long as it's healthy.
Definitely. And I like how you put that because at the end of the day we give guidance. We don't really give so much, advice. I'm not I'm not gonna tell you to push the green button or push the red button. I'm gonna say, hey, like why do you think pushing the green button would be, a good idea? That may be a question that I would ask, right? Like what does this green button mean to you? What does it represent, right? Versus, hey, push it. And I think that's where your friends will say, nah, push the green button. They kind of,
Exactly.
so I think that's kind of like the difference of like, okay, a therapist, best friends, all that good stuff. So for those people who are, on the verge of breaking up, or they've already decided, okay, I want to break up, right? Like, how do they do that in a nice way, like amicably? Like how do people break up in a good way so that it's not messy, it's not negative or anything like that?
That's a great question. I feel as though the best way to end a relationship is to come to that person with your feelings. So it's not like this relationship not going to work because you do X, Y, and Z. No. Because of course, automatically the other person is defense mode, ready to attack. That's fight or flight. We're animals, our instinct is to protect ourselves. So you come at me like that, I'm going to retaliate. So if you want to amicably end things, I feel as though it's taking some time for self before you jump into that decision of, oh, I'm letting it go. Journal, maybe. I highly recommend journaling, sitting with yourself, music therapy, tapping into yourself, and then realizing sit there and see, why don't you want to be in this relationship? It's unfulfilling. I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied, whatever the reason is. And then when you go to that person, you're now speaking about your own experiences for self. I don't think this relationship is going to work because I am feeling unfulfilled because fill in the blank, and give them the reason, not just giving them these empty, open-ended statements. And now they're sitting there trying to figure out what, why, who. No, just let them know, I'm unhappy because I feel as though I'm not focused on my career anymore because I'm focused on the relationship too much. So for myself, I got to step back a little bit. Something of that nature where you're putting it on yourself and not blaming the other person. I feel like that's the best way to amicably let something go.
Yeah. And I agree with that. You want to use those I statements, and I think that's what I heard you're getting at. You want to make sure that you explain it like where you're coming from, right? You don't want to say like, oh, you did this, you did that, so on and so forth. Because as you mentioned, people will get defensive, and then that's when people start mudslinging or maybe even bringing up things in the past, maybe things that you told them in confidence when you were at a dark place in your time, and now these things are being used as weapons. So you definitely use those I statements and make sure that, and it sounds so cliche, but make sure that they know it's probably you and not them as a person or whatever it is. But even if it is, right, let's say they cheated, or let's say they were being abusive, I definitely think you could still put that in a positive way. And then also if warranted, or if it's the time, make suggestions for like referrals for whether it's, therapists or whatever it is, because and I talk about this in in my last podcast. You don't want to use the idea of needing to go see a therapist as a weapon as well. You don't want to be like, man, you should see a therapist, man. Like you acting crazy, right? Like, nah, like that doesn't have the same notion as, hey, I think maybe maybe a therapy, and again, it's the timing, but just saying, hey, have you ever thought about therapy? and being able to speak from experience. Like if you have seen a therapist and then you relay that to them before you make that suggestion, I think it comes off a little softer as well, right? I think people can accept that a little bit better. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think if you're going to suggest therapy, also look into it for yourself. So when you do go to someone and you're like, I think therapy could be helpful or useful for you, I too am going to go because I need to work on XYZ that I've discovered about myself. I think it's, again, like you were saying, keeping it on self and not those you statements for sure.
Definitely, definitely. And we're gonna wrap up here soon, but for those who are thinking about going to therapy, right? Like, what does couples therapy look like? Because like I have an idea of what, like I know what individual therapy looks like because I've been to therapy, right?
Uh-huh.
But I've never been to couples therapy. I see it on TV, and actually, I want to say there's a show on, I think it's Stars, or maybe I think it's on Stars. And it's like it's an actual show about couples therapy. But like, how does like that dynamic work? Like, do you have them both come in? Do you see one first and then the other? Like, how does couples therapy work?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, honestly, because in my training and in school, I've had so many professors say, like, who's interested in couples? And I've always said me, and everybody else is like, why? Like, why would you want two people? That's two energies. That's two, why? But I think couples therapy, I think it's so great because you're able to, like we were saying, have that neutral third party. And so that balances out, because it's either I'm right or you're right or we're wrong. And you get that third person that's kind of like, balancing like a seesaw. So I feel like to me, that's what I think couples therapy looks like. There's a little bit of this on the seesaw, and then you kind of have the therapist helping them to balance themselves out. Um, but couples therapy that I can say it looks like just going into there and having an open conversation with somebody like, hey, so what brings you here? That's like the question that everybody asks. So you're asking the couple, why are you guys here? Why now? You guys been together blank amount of time. Why today? No, why not 2 months ago or a year from now? And then you just let them kind of share what's happening right now, and that caused them to come in presently, because that's what people are going to talk about. The infidelity is what has brought us here. It's like, okay, so we can unpack the infidelity maybe, or definitely, not maybe, we'll definitely talk about the infidelity, but it goes beyond that, because the relationship, let's talk about the relationship. And oftentimes something that I do love about couples therapy is asking the couple, like, tell me about when you guys first met. Because when they come to therapy, they're usually at the point where they're through the roof. So it's like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to hear all of that out when they come in. And then, so maybe it's the second or third session where I'm like, tell me about how you guys first met. And that allows them to, get out of that problem centered thinking. And it's like, at one point you really liked each other enough to start dating, and having them walk through and like, okay, so how do we go from there to present day? And then help them make those connections. And I think couples therapy is so beautiful in that way, that it allows these two people who love each other and who want to be together figure it out. And then sometimes there's couples who come to couples therapy and they decide, okay, so we definitely don't. And that was one of my first couples that I saw. They were trying to decide if they were going to divorce or not. And then after our sessions, they decided to go their separate ways. And a lot of people were like, how does that make you feel? And I'm like, oh, I don't feel any kind of way. I'm happy because they came to me to figure out what they wanted to do. After they saw me, they decided what's best for us is to go our separate ways. So that's a job well done, in my opinion, because they were able to come to that agreement together and happily go on their separate ways.
Therapist of the year, Raven.
Thank you.
Like,
You're too good.
the reason why I say that is because even I, as a therapist, right? Like I don't specialize in couples, but whenever a couple comes in, like to see some other therapist or a therapist that is a couples therapist, I always thought like, okay, the goal is to get them back together, happy, lovey-dovey, and that is not the case. That is not the case. Like the goal is to give them clarity. The goal is to get them past this step in their life, right? So like anyone looking to go to a therapist to, make their husband or their wife love them or whatever it is, I think you have the wrong idea of why you came in. Is that accurate to say?
Absolutely. You can't bring them in to like this is gonna make them love me even more. Like we're gonna go to therapy. You can't that may happen. Yes, that's one outcome. But the other outcome may be that now you've drug your partner into therapy. You guys are going through these sessions and your partner's like, oh wait, maybe I don't like it. Maybe divorce is, more on my option or on the forefront. And I think that's okay too. Not being tied down, especially as a therapist. I'm not tied to any outcomes. I'm tied to healthy outcomes. I guess that's probably the only outcome, healthy. So if it's best that the couple goes their separate ways, as long as you guys are healthily making that decision, great. If you guys decide, you know what, we're going to make this work because we want to, great. So let's try to figure that out. But I'm just here, I'm not here to sway you any other way. I don't want to make you guys stay together because some people are best separated, and that's just what it is. So I'm not here to make you stay or go. I'm just here to, like you said, bring clarity to your situation so that you can then decide what to do.
Yeah, that is gold. That is gold for whether you're a therapist or someone looking to go into therapy. Like that is gold, right?
Yes.
And actually, I think it probably helps you and other therapists operate better because you don't have that pressure, right? Like that's a lot of pressure to to hold, right? Like, okay, I got to get this couple back to lovey-dovey, how
Mhm.
things were in the past, and who knows, that may not be the goal, right? That may not be possible.
Right. I've had some couples where they just needed help on co-parenting. We have decided that we're splitting, but we have children. Okay, great. So the children are the focus. I'm not here trying to mend the relationship. What does this look like? This new life with the children and that. So yeah, just not being invested in one certain outcome, just the healthiest outcome, really.
Gotcha. Awesome. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. And before we do, I want you to just give your biggest takeaway for people who are going through a breakup or have already broken up, whether it's a year out, a day out, whatever it is. What is your advice? Your biggest takeaway for
My,
those who have just broken up with someone?
my biggest takeaway, the biggest message that I have is you have survived every single one of your worst days yet. You survived them all because we're here present day. What we thought was going to break us last year or 2 years ago, 6 months ago, and we're still here present day. So I think this is just another one of those. It sucks. I don't think anyone really. Well, I can't say that. Some people may enjoy the breakup. Maybe they needed that freedom. So but some people on average don't like the fact that a relationship has ended. So I think it's just remember to go into self, go inward. Go inward always. If there's any question, any doubt, any worry, go inward. You'll find the answers when you start doing that self work, for sure.
Mm, mm. Robert Frost, he said, "The only way out is through."
Yes,
That's,
absolutely,
that's the best way to explain that. So,
absolutely.
do you have any like book recommendations, any resources that you think someone could, check out, whether it's about therapy in general, breakups, relationships? It could be relationships. I know you gave a great one about love languages, but any resources for people listening?
Definitely check out the love language quiz because it's free. It's something that you can just take 10 minutes of your time, answer a few questions. So start there. And then, yeah, I say start there with couples work. A lot of my work now that I'm doing is more centered on Black work. So what I'm reading now is, I'll show you my latest book for my capstone project, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome,
Mm,
America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. So it's basically how Black people can heal because we are still dealing with the trauma of slavery, present day. This book, I highly recommend to everybody. So I think if you're just looking for a great read, that's one because it definitely talks about how you can start healing the self. So work with yourself, and then we can heal the masses.
wow. I'm gonna check that book out.
Definitely, it's a must. I'm telling everybody about it. Dr. Joy DeGruy, for sure.
I'm definitely gonna check that out. I have a stack of books that I gotta get through, but that's being ordered.
Yeah, drop it in your Amazon cart. That's what I do. Whenever I hear a title of a book, I just drop the book in my cart. So when I'm ready for my next book, because I can't, like you said, a stack of books that you're reading. So definitely just drop that in your Amazon cart.
Definitely, definitely. I want to do that. I want to do that. So, everyone listening, hopefully today you saw how therapy could help everyone, whether you're going through a breakup, whether you're still in a relationship that's on the brinks. Therapy could possibly help you, your partner, and also your entire family, right? So, we talked about therapy being provided in the form of systems, right?
Mhm.
So, you definitely want to check out all the resources that Raven talked about. Again, check out my podcast. It's called The Podcast. Therapy Helps Everyone. It's streaming on Anchor, it's streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other places. Also, you can check out my website, theplayerscoach.net. And actually, I do have the love languages quiz under my resources. So if you guys want to check that out, you definitely want to go to my website. And also my Instagram. My Instagram is the Players Coach LLC. So you can go there. Be sure to follow me. Send me a message, whatever it is. And also, Raven, I don't know if you want to give people your contact of how they can reach you. If you do, definitely go ahead.
Absolutely. The best way to get any updates on what's going to be happening with me and my practice and everything, follow me on Instagram at True Frequency TS Therapeutic Services. So it's True, spelled out TRUE, Frequency FREQUENCY TS. No underscore or anything like that. You can find me on Instagram. That'll be the best way to contact me directly. Any questions? I'm always here to, answer questions, help out. I'm just here, being the vessel that the higher sources made me and allowed me to be. So reach out. I'm always just a DM away.
Definitely, definitely. Well, with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. And if there's a topic that you want to hear us talk about, definitely send us a message. And actually, what I'm going to do, if not in my next episode, a future episode, speak about how infidelity can affect a relationship and what to do next. So, all right. Thanks, guys.